Hello everyone, this is Coach B with masteryourchess.com, and in this video I'm going to take a little turn and I'm going to spend some time doing some video series on Middlegame. Many times chess players, they study some openings, they study some tactics, some end games, and then they play tournaments. And between tournaments they keep doing puzzles and learning a little bit more about endgame theory, or they try to improve their opening or study a different opening, and they seem to reach a level above 1400 that they can't seem to go beyond that. And their main problem is the problem with planning. When going over games, many times players were asked what plan they had in a particular position, and most of the times they give a typical answer and they answer what they felt like doing instead of what the board was telling them to do. In this video series, we're going to learn how to read the chessboard, focusing on the imbalances of the position. An imbalance is any significant difference in the two positions. They represent the strength and weaknesses for white and for black, and how we should act because of those differences. The imbalances act as a map that shows each side what to do. Over the years, I've read a lot of books that focus on this material, and my favorite book is How to Reassess Your Chess by international master Silman. In this video series, I'm going to present a lot of his work, and I wanted to give him credit for it. There are 10 types of imbalances that I'm going to present in this video series, and throughout these videos we're going to learn how we need to respond because of these imbalances. The imbalances alone will lead you to the right moves in most positions, or even help you create a detailed plan. The list of imbalances include the superior minor piece, pawn structure, space, material, control of a key file, control of a whole or weak square, lead in development, the initiative, king safety, and statics versus dynamics. So let's take a look at one of each of these examples. Our first example is the superior minor piece, bishop versus knight. If you look in this diagram and you compare white's bishop, which is eyeing two position penetrating diagonals, and black's slacker knight, you will immediately know which minor piece is winning the battle. When you add other imbalances into the equation, white has an advantage in both central and queenside space, a target on a7, which can be gobbled up by rook to a1 going to b1 and then to b7, and also attacking the a7 together with the bishop. Chances to mate after bishop to c3 and then followed by queen to d4, creating a battery and going towards g7 checkmate. One could understand if black chose to resign at this moment. In this next position, you could see that white's knight is superior to the bishop, attacking into the enemy camp on all of these squares, while if you look at the bishop, he's pretty much caged in with not much activity. White has also other favorable imbalances like central, queenside, and kingside space, control of the whole on e6, and after the rook from a1 coming to b1 and then to b7, white will put a lot of pressure on c7 and also a7, and there's not much that black can do about that. The next example we're looking at is pawn structure, which include weak pawns, passed pawns, pawn islands, and many more, which we're going to go more in depth when we're going to talk about the video just on this particular topic. So in this position, if we take a look, black is up a pawn and he has two passed pawns to white's one passer. Yet black can resign. What's the reason? Well, white's passed pawn is further advanced and all his pieces are working together with the pawn to make sure that he scores a touchdown on b8. So after b7, white is threatening to win a whole rook after promoting the pawn to a queen, and rook captures. We will be able to capture back, as we do have two attackers on that square, the rook and the bishop. After rook captures, there's only one defender of the rook after that. So here black will play rook to b8. After this, the bishop will take the rook takes the bishop, and now queen to c6. If the queen takes on c6, then after that we're simply going to capture back. Let's say bishop to e5, we're going to come with rook to c8 check, king to g7, f4 to gain more space, bishop to d6, rook will take on b8, the bishop will take back, And after rook to a1, let's say pawn to d3, king to f3 will stop the pawn on d3 as it enters the square of the pawn. So that's stopped. And after white will take the pawn on a6, will challenge the bishop and then win the bishop by promoting the pawn. So here white is easily winning. And if we go back after queen to c6, if black moves the queen to d8, from here we're going to simply move the queen to c8, bishop to e5, we will take on d8, rook will take back, and now rook to c8. And from here, there's nothing that black can do to stop us from pushing the pawn and gaining another piece. In this next position, black has a weak isolated pawn on e6, and naturally white will dedicate his game going after it. Right now, he's attacking this pawn 3 times with the 2 rooks and the queen. Black is defending 3 times as well with the 2 rooks and the queen as well. But now white will move the bishop to h3, attacking the pawn a 4th time. Black will probably respond with knight to d8, defending the pawn a 4th time. And now knight to g5, attacking the pawn a 5th time. And from here, if black simply retreats the bishop to b8, white can use another trick here with pawn to f5. After g takes on f5, the bishop can take on f5 as well, as black cannot capture the bishop. Capturing the bishop, black will go down in exchange. After pawn takes the bishop, rook takes on e7, rook takes back, and now rook takes e7. White won the exchange and it's easily winning from here. And coming back, even if black doesn't take the bishop, he's totally losing this position. He's going to lose the pawn, which is being attacked 5 times. And also black's king is very, very weak. White is easily winning from here. In this next example, we're going to talk about space advantage. If you look at this position, you can see that white has a significant space advantage virtually in every sector, in the center, on the queen side, and on the king side. Black, having a lack of space, has limited mobility. In such positions, the side with this much extra space will almost certainly win if he can find a way to break into the enemy territory. Here white, who enjoys a wealth of riches, can accomplish this by preparing a queenside entry via c4, c5, or a kingside entry via g4, g5. And probably before pushing the pawn from g4 to g5, white can bring the rook on c1, either to g1 or to h1, just to support the attack, and then moving the pawn to g5 would definitely give him a winning advantage. In this next position, we're going to take a look at material advantage. In this position, with white to play, he is able to take the pawn on b7 with the bishop. Taking this pawn, white is up a pawn now, which does a number of useful things. First of all, it gives white an advantage in the endgame since the odds are in his favor now. This move also creates a weak square on c6. It also gives white the ability to grab control of the central light squares along the h1, a8 diagonal. And this will put a lot more psychological pressure on black, and he's going to have to try not to trade his pieces because that will help white even more. After the bishop takes on c7, there's not much that black can do here as a response. For example, if he plays c6 trying to lock the bishop, this doesn't work because after queen to c4 check, the king moves away and now white is able to win another pawn and also gain even more advantage. Coming back, if black plays bishop to g4 here, trying to skewer the white queen, well, this doesn't work. A simple f4 would be able to stop this, or even better, the queen could come to c4 check. After king to h8, bishop to c6, the queen will have to move away, and now white can move the rook away to d2, followed by pawn to f4 and gaining even more space and also a winning position. In this game, black played the king to h8, and after that, white responded with queen to c4, gaining more control of the light squares, and also easily won the game from here. In this next example, we're looking at what it means to control a key file. So in this position, you could see that the only open file there is the E file, and white has control of it because he has the rooks doubled up on the E file already. Now, if we were black to move, he would definitely try to fight for that file, moving either one of the rooks on the E file to try to trade it. However, with white to move, white is definitely in control of this file because after bishop to c6, the bishop will also fight on that square, and now black cannot fight for that file anymore as he is going to go down in exchange. So from here, black will either lose or draw, and white should either win or draw, as the odds are in his favor. If black is trying to fight for that file with queen to g4, after rook to e4, white pretty much claims the file and there's not much that black can do. All he can do is hope that white will not be able to find a way to break through in his position and win the game. This next example, we're going to take a look at the control of a whole or a weak square. In this position, white enjoys extra space all over the board, but the battle is clearly between the minor pieces. Both minor pieces are not actively placed. However, only the white knight can improve his position since the black bishop is trapped. The question is, where should the knight move to? Well, to answer this question, we want to find weaknesses in black's camp that the white knight will be able to reach. And we consider those as holes or weak squares, also called outposts by other authors, the squares where the knight will not be able to be chased away by a pawn. So if we look at our position, the square d5 is an excellent square, and the square e6 is an even better square. From those positions, the knight will be super strong, attacking in black's camp and definitely giving white an advantage. You could see, especially from the square e6, the knight will be attacking on f8, the rook on d8, putting pressure on g7. It will also be able to attack all these other places in black's camp, and the knight will be super strong. So that should be our path. Knight to d3, to f4, and then jumping into e6. And at the right time, well-planned g4 to g5 should definitely give white a win in this position. In this next example, we're going to take a look at a lead in development and opportunities that they create. A lead in development is a very dangerous thing. And as a rule, if you are behind in development, you should try to keep things closed until your king is safe and castled, and also your other pieces are developed to active squares. Opening gambits are based on creating the imbalance of material versus development, and they can give the attacker some quick wins if the opponent allows the position to open up. For this topic, I'm going to go over the Smith-Morra gambit, which is an opening that I also have on my website that you will be able to download and play as well. So this opening starts with e4 and c5. After that, d4, c takes d4, and then c3. If they accept the gambit taking on c3, then knight takes c3, knight c6, knight f3, d6, bishop c4. You could see here white already has two extra pieces developed than black. And here, after knight to f6 and e5, black is in a little bit of a pickle. If he takes the pawn, let's say d takes e5, then after this, queen will take on d8. If the knight takes back, then knight to b5, threatening to fork the king and the rook. And if the king tries to stop that, let's say king to d7, after knight to e5 check, the king is forced back to e8 as he is not able to come to any of these squares. And after king to e8, knight to c7 is checkmate. And coming back after we play e5, if the knight takes on e5, then after this we're going to capture the knight, pawn takes back, we will be able to sacrifice the bishop on f7, and after the king takes the bishop, we will be able to win the queen, and being up a queen, we should have an easy win from here. And you could see we're on 10th move and already having a winning game. In this next example, we're going to talk about initiative. In chess, both players are trying to push their own agenda. And there are two main types of mistakes that players make in their game. The first one is that each player is trying to push their own agenda, but a lot of times the players don't look at the plan of their opponent. They just know what they want to do and they keep trying to push their own agenda without reacting to what the other player is doing or trying to stop what the other player is doing. And playing chess like that, you kind of have like a 50-50 chance sometimes. Sometimes you'll succeed, sometimes your opponents will succeed, and it's not healthy to do that. And the other mistake that players make is that you just try to stop your opponent playing passively without having a plan of their own. The best way to play chess is stopping your opponent's plan, but also with the threat. A lot of times the best defense is counterattack. You just have to make sure that you do watch out what your opponent's plan is, and and stop it, but also with the threat to force him to react to what you're doing, and then you'll be able to push your own agenda and successfully win the game. In this position, white just moved his knight to h4, intending to go on g6. Also, he would like to swing the other knight to e3 and then to d5. On the other hand, black is trying to take advantage of the loose knight on c4 and also the pawn that's not defended on a2. Here, black can stop the knight going to g6 with king to h7. However, this is a purely defensive move, and white gets the opportunity to push his own agenda. After this, the bishop will take on c5, queen takes c5, knight to e3, knight to b6. We could jump with the knight to d5. And now if the knight will take on d5, we're going to be able to take with the pawn. E takes d5, bishop takes d5, and after we exchange bishops, rook takes d5, we do have queen to e4 check, also doubling up on the rook and winning that rook. And coming back, a better reply for black is bishop takes d5, after which we're going to take on e5, knight to e7, queen to e4 check, king to h8, and after c4, white is able to make some complications and also has a slightly better position. A much better response for black here is queen to f7. This stops knight to g6, and it also at the same time counterattacks knight on c4. So this move defends but also pushes black's agenda at the same time. Now the square e3 is not available for the knight, and a knight retreat hangs the pawn on a2. Suddenly, black is the one dictating the direction of the game, and white has to scramble to keep his position together. If rook takes on d7, the rook will take back. After bishop takes c5, black will take the knight on c4. After queen to g4, the bishop will take the rook on f1, bishop takes on f8, and after the bishop takes on g2, black king takes on g2 and king takes on f8, black is up a whole rook. Coming back after b3, bishop takes c4, b takes c4, bishop takes e3, and f takes e3, white is left with an exceptionally ugly pawn formation, giving black a huge advantage. So always look for moves that defend but also counterattack at the same time. That's the way you want to play chess. In this next example, we're going to take a look at king safety. In this position, white has sacrificed the pawn, but enjoys a lead in development and a safe king, while black's king is still in the center. So here, after knight takes h7, white is totally winning. If the king takes on f7, after this, we will have queen takes e6 check, king to g6, bishop d3 check, and after king h5, we have queen to h3 checkmate. And coming back, I want to mention after knight takes f7, no better is queen to c7. After knight takes the rook on h8, the pawn on e6 is very weak as it's being attacked by the bishop and the queen, and white is totally winning this game as well. In this next example, we're going to talk about statics versus dynamics, which can also be called the battle between short-term and long-term imbalances. Statics and dynamics occur in every phase of the game. In general, a dynamic is something that needs to be used reasonably in a quick manner. It can be a quick combination that will lead to checkmate, or that will create a long-lasting advantage. A static imbalance gives its owner something that will be around for a long time. In this position, white has an isolated d4 pawn, and black views this as a static weakness. He's going to try to use his pieces to pile up on it and eventually win it. While white views the pawn as a dynamic strength, it gives central space, control of the two important squares e5 and c5, and allows white, whose extra space makes his pieces more active than their black counterparts, to build up a nasty kingside attack in many lines. Countless world-class players have championed both sides of this position. So in the next couple of videos, we're going to spend more time on these imbalances and learn how to recognize them in any board situation, understand what each imbalance offers, and know how to make use of it or diffuse it depending on which side of the imbalance you are sitting on. Thank you so much for watching, and hope you stay tuned. If you liked my video, please subscribe and don't forget to check out my new website, masteryourchess.com, where you can learn, practice, test, and master your chess knowledge.